The clock with no hands. Imagine darkness, then a faint, flickering radio signal. A voice comes through, crackling, distant, barely human. It's an old broadcast, looping for years.
This is the final transmission from Station Epsilon. The tower has reappeared. We've lost all sense of time. Please, if anyone hears this, do not approach it.
The scene shifts. You see ancient papers, sketches of a black spire surrounded by storm clouds. A journal lies open, ink drips off the page and floats upward, defying gravity. On the cover, one title, "The Tower That Waits at the Edge of Time." A narrator speaks, deep, calm, and chilling. Time is not a line. It's a spiral, and at the center of that spiral, it watches. Then, silence. Only the ticking of a clock with no hands. Chapter 1. The House That Remembers. The storm had no warning. It rolled in without a sound. No wind, no lightning, no thunderclap to split the silence. Just sudden, suffocating darkness swallowing the edges of the town like a predator closing its jaws. The streetlights died. The clocks in every house stopped at precisely 2:17 a.m. And in a forgotten part of the world, where the forest pressed tight against rotting buildings, Elara Voss opened her eyes to the sound of ticking. But the clocks in her apartment had no hands. She sat up sharply, breath fogging in the cold air, though the room's old radiator wheezed and hissed behind her. Something was wrong, not just strange, wrong, like the feeling of waking up from a dream you can't remember, but know should have killed you. The ticking grew louder, not rhythmic, not steady. It stuttered, skipped, slowed, like a dying heart. She followed it out of bed, feet bare on creaking wood, passing the mirror in the hallway without looking in. She never looked in at night, not since the dream about the mirror breathing. The sound led her to the kitchen. There, on the table, was an envelope. It hadn't been there when she'd gone to bed. The paper was yellowed, edges burned, sealed with dark wax pressed into the shape of an hourglass that was melting. She stared at it, throat dry. Her name was written on it in a handwriting she recognized instantly, though it should have been impossible. A.V., the initials of her mother. But her mother had been dead for 16 years, buried, cremated, gone. Hands shaking, she tore it open. A single key fell out, old, iron, shaped like a serpent devouring its tail. The letter inside read only 3 words: "The door remembers." Suddenly, a loud knock came from the front door. Not a gentle tap, not the kind of knock you hear in a city apartment at night. This one echoed, boomed, like a fist slamming on the walls of a tomb. Elara's body froze. She hadn't invited anyone. She hadn't spoken to anyone in days. The knock came again, 3 times. Then, silence. When she finally opened the door, no one was there. But outside, parked beneath a flickering street lamp that hadn't worked in years, was a black car. The driver's seat was empty, the engine was dead, yet the back door stood wide open. Inside was a manila folder. No note, no name, just the title stamped in red, Property Transfer, Elara Voss. She flipped it open. Inside were deeds, keys, and a map. The map was sketched in dark ink, stained with water and time, and it led to a town she'd never heard of, Derridge Hollow. At the bottom, in the same handwriting from the letter, was scrawled, "Go now, before the tower moves again." 3 days later, she arrived at the house. It stood alone on a hill choked with ash trees, their bare branches like grasping hands. The house was not abandoned, but it looked like it had been waiting. Old wood warped like it had held its breath for decades. The windows were black, like eyes that had seen too much. A wind moved through the air that didn't belong to the living. Elara unlocked the front door with the serpent key. The moment it clicked, something changed behind her eyes. The house felt familiar, but not from life, from dreams, from whispers in sleep. As she stepped inside, the floor moaned beneath her, and the scent of burnt paper filled her lungs. The walls were covered in old photographs, not of people, but of places that didn't exist anymore. Cities half swallowed by the sea, a clock tower with no stairs, a lighthouse floating upside down in the sky. She walked through the halls like she was underwater. Every door she passed whispered, "Not yet," when she reached for the knob, until she found the one that didn't. It was at the end of the hall, beneath the attic staircase. Unlike the others, this door was made of black wood, covered in carvings, symbols that pulsed faintly in the dark, spirals, eyes, hourglasses, moons split in half. Behind it, that same uneven ticking. She reached for the handle, locked, but just as she turned to walk away, she heard something on the other side, not the ticking, breathing, deep, wet, slow, as if something slept on the other side of the wood. Then, faintly like it was being spoken through a radio submerged in water, a voice whispered, "You're late." She ran.
That night, the dreams returned, but this time they weren't hers. She saw a man in a long black coat standing in front of a tower that scraped the stars. A tower with no base, no shadow, no reflection. It hung like a tuning fork struck by a god. The man turned to her slowly. His face was a clock with no hands, and when he opened his mouth to speak, all that came out was that same sentence from the letter. The door remembers. Elara woke in the middle of the night, sitting upright in the attic. She didn't remember walking there. In her hands, the map. Only now the ink moved, twisting, reshaping. The destination glowed faintly with crimson light, and beneath it, in new handwriting, something had been added. The tower has returned. And just for a second, no more, she thought she could hear bells ringing, very far away.
Chapter 2. The Map Drawn in Ashes. The attic had no windows. No light came in, none went out. Yet when Elara opened her eyes, she saw everything. She stood in the middle of the room, still holding the map, but now the attic looked different. It was the same space, the same creaking beams and dust-choked rafters, but something had changed. The walls were covered in scorch marks, not fresh burns, ancient, blackened streaks that curled and twisted into strange shapes, like the fire had tried to write something before dying. As her eyes adjusted, she realized they weren't random. They were lines, paths, coordinates, a map, burned directly into the wood. She ran her fingers along one charred groove, and her skin prickled. The soot was warm, almost alive, and it pulsed when she touched the center, where all the lines converged into a black circle, surrounded by symbols she didn't understand. She whispered without meaning to, "The tower," and something whispered back, a sound from beneath the floorboards, a voice without shape, sliding between languages, syllables bending backward. "You see it now." She stumbled back, breathing hard, and the floor creaked sharply beneath her. For a moment, she swore she saw movement, shadows shifting behind the blackened map, like something was moving beneath the wood, like the tower was watching her back.
Later, after the dizziness passed, she took a photo of the burnt map with her phone, but the screen showed only static. She tried again with a flashlight. Same result. The burns didn't exist digitally. She had to copy them by hand. As she traced the lines with charcoal and paper, something strange began to emerge. The path wasn't just geographic. It was symbolic. The road to the tower passed through a series of places marked not by names, but by experiences. Each stop had a carved glyph beside it, a cracked mirror, an eye with no pupil, a staircase spiraling into smoke, and finally, a door with something reaching through it. She didn't understand any of it except the last symbol. That door was the one beneath her attic, and the thing reaching through, she had heard it breathe. When morning came, she packed. She didn't know why. There was no logic in it. No certainty, just an overwhelming, nauseating sense that if she stayed, the house would start changing around her. Or maybe it already had. She loaded the car with the bare minimum: map, journal, flashlight, boots. No phone, no GPS. Neither had worked since the dream. The digital world refused to acknowledge what was coming. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. Not that she had anyone to tell. The first marked location on the map was Derridge Hollow, a place she couldn't find on any satellite image. Just a faded name in the corner of an old railroad atlas buried in her grandfather's collection. It was once a logging town, lost to a fire in the 1930s. Officially, it didn't exist anymore, but the map said otherwise. She drove for 5 hours in silence, watching the world grow stranger with every mile. The trees leaned closer to the road, the clouds thinned into spirals. Time felt slower, like the air had weight. The farther she drove, the more her rearview mirror blurred. Eventually it stopped reflecting her completely when she passed the rusted sign for Derridge Hollow Pop. The wind stopped blowing. There was no one left, but something had stayed. The town was ash. Blackened husks of buildings leaned like broken teeth. The air stank of soot and metal. But the streets were intact, strangely untouched by the fire. No wind, no birds, just silence and the sound of her own boots on cracked stone. Then something caught her eye. A shape drawn in soot. On the side of an old post office was the same symbol from the attic map. The cracked mirror, smeared in black, like someone had dragged a burning hand across the wall. Next to it, a door, clean, unburned. She pushed it open. Inside was a mirror, one mirror, nothing else. But it wasn't cracked, it was moving. The reflection didn't match her, it wasn't reversed, it wasn't even mimicking her perfectly. It blinked out of sync, smiled too long, moved its lips without sound. She took a step back, the reflection stayed in place, then it raised its hand and touched the glass from the inside. The surface of the mirror rippled, not like water, like time. She fled the building, heart pounding, breath short. She'd seen something inside that mirror, not just her reflection. Behind it, for only a second, she'd seen a tower rising above a sea of black trees, its tip lost in storm clouds that bled upward instead of down. The tower was real, and it was calling her. She looked back at the post office door. Burned into the wood above the frame, barely visible in daylight, were 4 words. Next, where it watches. She unfolded the map. The next symbol glowed faintly, an eye with no pupil. She had no idea what it meant, but she knew now this map wasn't showing her the way. It was remembering it for her, like the tower had already happened, like she was retracing a path she hadn't walked yet. That night, back at her motel, the lights flickered every time she looked at the map. At exactly 2:17 a.m., her bathroom mirror cracked. No reason, no pressure, just a clean fracture down the middle. She didn't scream. She just stared at her reflection and whispered, "Where do you watch from?" The answer came, scratched into the condensation on the mirror by an invisible hand. "We
never stopped. End of chapter 2. Chapter 3. The Man Who Lost Tomorrow. The next town on the map didn't have a name, no welcome sign, no population count. Just a line of rotted cabins pressed between trees, half sunk into the marshland like they were trying to disappear. The sky above was gray and restless, clouds twisting like smoke caught in a slow spiral. Elara's phone battery was full, but refused to turn on. Her watch had stopped again, 2:17 a.m., even though it was late afternoon. She parked at the edge of a crumbling gas station, engine ticking in the quiet. Across the street stood an old cafe. No lights, no sound, but a thin wisp of steam curled from a cracked chimney. Something, or someone, was still inside. The air here felt off, like the entire place was suspended between seconds, a town caught in the act of being forgotten. Elara entered the cafe. Inside, everything was preserved in amber dust, half-finished meals, chairs pushed back from tables, a jukebox that hadn't played music in decades. But one man sat at the far end of the room, alone, hunched over a cup of black coffee that never steamed. He wore a long coat, patched with old military fabric, eyes hidden under a wide-brimmed hat. His hands were covered in writing. Names, it looked like, hundreds of them, tattooed in faded ink across his skin like tally marks. One name repeated over and over, Elara. She stepped forward slowly. "You know me?" He didn't look up. His voice was low, brittle, like it hadn't been used in years. "I knew you. Or maybe I will. Depends when this is." That stopped her cold. "I'm sorry?" The man raised his face just enough for her to see that he had no eyes. Just scarred lids sealed shut, as though they'd been removed or closed to protect him from seeing something that couldn't be unseen. "You found the map, didn't you?" "Yes." "Then it started again." She sat across from him. "What is the tower?" The man didn't answer right away. He reached into his coat and pulled out a broken pocket watch. It had no hands. "Time dies inside it," he said. "Not all at once, not like a fire. More like drowning, slow, quiet, beautiful if you don't know what you're looking at." Elara leaned in. "You've been there?" "No." He laughed softly. "I never left." He slid something across the table, a faded photograph. It showed a younger version of himself standing at the foot of a tower made of impossible angles, its base curved upward like a rib cage, its walls covered in clocks, none of them the same time. There was a woman beside him. Her face was missing from the photo, ripped out carefully. "My wife went looking for her sister. Said she saw her reflection move on its own. The tower showed up in our dreams for a month. Then one day, it wasn't a dream." "What happened?" He paused as if remembering burned. "We went in together. We walked the halls, heard the bells, but time moves differently inside. You lose your sense of order. Past, future, memory, identity. They're all rooms in the same hallway. And once you open the wrong door," he trailed off. "I got out, but I left my tomorrow behind." Elara frowned. "What does that mean?" He raised his head again. "It means I have no future." The cafe flickered. Just for a second, the entire world skipped like an old film reel. Elara blinked and realized her coffee was full, hot, steaming, though she hadn't ordered it. The clock on the wall ticked backward. The man across from her hadn't moved. "If you already know me," she asked slowly, "then you know what I'm going to do. Can I stop it?" He didn't answer. He only whispered, "You've already been to the top." "What's at the top?" He leaned forward, face tightening. "A mirror that shows the thing behind your eyes." She left the cafe just after sunset. The air had grown colder.
The light was wrong. The sun was stuck halfway below the horizon, frozen in that uncomfortable orange hue that made shadows stretch for miles. As she turned to look back one more time, the cafe was gone. The road behind her was forest again. No town, no gas station, just trees. And beneath her boot, something crunched. She bent down and picked it up. It was the photo the man had shown her, the one with the tower. But now the woman's face was no longer torn away. It was her own. That night she didn't sleep. She sat in the motel bathtub, the lights off, map on her lap, watching the ink shift again. The next symbol had changed. What was once an eyeless face now looked like a keyhole inside a brain. Beside it, a single word burned into the page: remember. She whispered to the empty room, "What am I supposed to remember?" The mirror fogged, though the water was cold, and in the glass, just for a second, she saw herself standing not in the bathroom, but in the hallway of the tower, drenched, bleeding, holding something in her hands that looked like a clock made of teeth. Then it was gone. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. Fog that remembers faces. The road ended without warning. The map led her deep into the marshlands until the asphalt dissolved into cracked stone, then into gravel, then into nothing but black, rain-slick mud. Trees leaned in tighter here, like mourners at a graveside, their roots twisted above ground, tangled like knotted veins. Every branch dripped. Elara got out of the car, boots sinking in cold earth. The fog rolled in as she opened the door, not drifting, but arriving, like it had been waiting just beyond the last road sign, watching. It had weight, color, memory. Within seconds, she couldn't see more than 10 feet in any direction. She checked the map again. The ink writhed. A small line blinked into view near the top corner. The tower only appears when no one is watching. She looked up instinctively. The fog thickened in response. She walked for what felt like hours. No birds, no wind, no sound but her own breathing and the soft crunch of wet gravel underfoot. Every few steps, she saw faces in the fog, human outlines, half-formed just beyond the veil. They didn't move, they didn't speak, but they stared. She turned to look at one, just a glimpse, and it was her own face, hovering in the mist, eyes hollow, mouth sewn shut with strands of time. When she blinked, it was gone. "This place remembers you," a voice whispered. She spun around. Nothing there. The fog pulsed, and suddenly she wasn't alone. A figure emerged just 20 feet away. A child, no older than 7, dressed in white, barefoot, hair soaked with dew. Her eyes glowed faintly in the mist. Elara approached slowly, heart pounding. "Are you lost?" she asked. The girl said nothing. Then she raised a finger and pointed, not ahead, but up. Elara followed the gesture.
and for the first time, she saw it.
The tower rose out of the fog like a memory resurfacing, impossible in scale, black stone streaked with silver veins, its sides uneven, like it had grown, not being built. Its top twisted away from reality, disappearing into storm clouds that circled silently overhead. There were no lights, no windows, and no door. Not until you blinked, then it was there, right in front of you, waiting. Elara stumbled back. The girl was gone. Only the fog remained, thicker now, pressing against her ears like cotton soaked in ice. She turned, but the past she'd come from had vanished. The world around her had shifted. A whisper swam past her ear. "Remember what you saw." Then she felt it, beneath her feet. The ground was breathing. She dropped to her knees. The soil pulsed, slow and deep, like a heartbeat under stone. She placed her hand on the earth, and in that moment, she saw a spiral staircase descending into nothing, a door made of bone, a hand reaching from inside a mirror, a version of herself staring back with black tears running upward. Elara screamed and yanked her hand away. Her fingertips were bleeding, not from a cut, but from writing. Letters were etched into her skin, carved in delicate red lines.
"Do not look up again."
The tower loomed silently above, half disappearing in the clouds. She turned back toward the fog. Her body moved without thinking, instinct guiding her away from the structure. But the fog wasn't passive anymore. It moved with her, against her. Every step became harder, not physically, but emotionally, like she was walking away from something she didn't remember she loved, like the tower was a long-lost memory whispering, "Come home." Eventually, she collapsed beneath a dying tree. She didn't know how long she lay there, but when she awoke, the fog was gone, and in the mud next to her hand was a single footprint. Too large to be hers, too fresh to be old. She wasn't alone anymore. Back at the motel that night, she tried to draw what she'd seen, but the moment her pencil touched paper, the graphite bent in half, not broke, bent, like it had refused to illustrate something forbidden. So she wrote instead. Her notebook trembled with each sentence. "The tower is real. The fog remembers. The girl knew me. I've been here before, but I don't remember when." She turned the page and froze. She hadn't written it, but there it was, in her handwriting. "Tomorrow, you meet the librarian." End of chapter 4. Chapter 5. The clock that ticks backward. The tower let her in. There was no decision, no moment of choice. 1 second, Elara stood at the tree line, watching the dark spire rise into the storm-laced sky. The next, the fog swallowed her, and when it receded, she stood at the foot of the tower's black stone, her hand already reaching for a door she hadn't seen until just now. It opened before she touched it, not with a creak, but with a sigh, as though the tower had been holding its breath for centuries and had just recognized her. She stepped inside. The interior was wrong. It shouldn't have fit inside. From the outside, the tower looked massive, yes, but what she saw within was infinite. The space unfolded upward like a throat of stars. Walls curved in impossible directions. Stone staircases hung mid-air, attached to nothing. Chandeliers of bones swung in windless air. Time itself felt thicker here, heavier. Every breath echoed like it had been exhaled long ago and was just now reaching her. She took a step forward. The floor rippled beneath her like frozen water. And then she heard it. A ticking, faint at first, then louder. Not steady, not mechanical, but like a heartbeat broken into pieces, stitched back together in the shape of a clock. She turned a corner following the sound. The hallway twisted in an unnatural arc,
leading her to a chamber unlike anything she'd seen in her life. It was a clock room. Dozens of clocks covered the walls, grandfather clocks, wristwatches, sundials, hourglasses suspended in midair, and bizarre alien mechanisms she couldn't even name, all ticking, none of them in sync. And in the center of the room stood a single object on a pedestal, a clock with no hands. It pulsed faintly, not light, but time itself. She felt it in her teeth. The pedestal had one word carved in spirals, return. As she stepped closer, the ticking slowed. Then, without warning, the hands of every other clock in the room reversed. The hourglasses began to fill upward. The shadows on the walls flowed backward. Elara reached out and touched the face of the handless clock. Her vision shattered. She was standing in a field of stars. The tower hovered in front of her, but now it was suspended in space, surrounded by shattered moons and black comets frozen in orbit. She saw herself, 1,000 versions, each walking toward the tower across different paths. One carried a lantern made of teeth. One dragged the mirror behind her. One was on fire but didn't burn. And one was already inside the tower, watching her through the clock's reflection. And then, snap! She fell backward onto the cold stone floor of the tower. She gasped. Blood dripped from her nose. The clocks had stopped, but the handless one now had one hand. It pointed backward. Behind her, a new door had appeared, tall, arched, sealed with a massive lock that resembled an open eye. As she stood, she noticed something else. She wasn't alone. A voice echoed from the far side of the room. "You should not have touched that." Elara spun. A figure stood in the shadows, tall, robed in deep purple, wearing a blindfold made of old parchment. On their chest glowed a sigil, a key inside an hourglass. Their voice echoed without sound. "Who are you?" "I am the clock warden," it replied. "I keep what should not be remembered. I guard what time has tried to forget." "What is this place?" "This is the place beneath all places, the echo beneath the world. Time does not pass here. It is consumed." Elara hesitated. "Why does it feel like I've been here before?" The clock warden stepped forward. "Because you have. Every time the tower awakens, you return. And every time you ask the same question." "What question?" "What's at the top?" The floor beneath her shook slightly, like something enormous had shifted far above. The clocks all ticked once. Tick, 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 tock. The clock warden continued. "Do not ascend unless you are willing to meet yourself." "I don't understand." "You will, or you already did, or you never will. All of these are true." Then the figure faded, not like a ghost, but like a page in a book being erased from history. Only one sound remained, the ticking of the handless clock, now with two hands, both moving backward. Elara stood before the eye-locked door. Behind it, a new part of the tower, a new truth, or an old one, finally remembered. She gripped the handle. The metal was warm, like skin. As she turned it, her vision blurred slightly. She felt the sensation of falling upward, and just before the door opened, she heard a whisper, not from behind her, but from inside her own mind. "You forgot again, didn't you?" End of Chapter 5.
Chapter 6. The room where you meet yourself. The door didn't open. It peeled. Not like wood on hinges, but like skin from bone, unfolding inward, layer by layer, until the space behind it yawned open into total darkness. No light. No sound. Just a smell, faint, metallic, like blood on cold glass. Elara stepped through. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, the world behind her vanished. The door was gone. She stood in a hall of mirrors. But these were not mirrors in any human sense. They were living reflections. Some cracked, some clean, all taller than her, all pulsing slightly at the edges, like they were breathing. They floated in the void, suspended with no walls, no floor, no ceiling, just endless darkness, punctuated by their shimmering surfaces. Each one showed her, but differently. She passed a mirror where her reflection was older, grey hair, deep lines, hollow eyes. Another where she was younger, but her arms were covered in black runes, one where she smiled too wide, one where she bled from the eyes, one where she was screaming, but no sound came out. She kept walking. A voice followed her, soft, familiar. "You never truly left this room." She stopped. The voice came from the mirror to her left. Inside, her reflection moved, but she hadn't. Her mirrored self tilted her head, studying Elara with a sad, almost maternal gaze. "Do you know who I am?" the reflection asked. "You're me." The reflection smiled. "I'm the version of you that never opened the letter. The one who stayed home, who turned off the light, who never found the map. I died quietly in a room that forgot me." Elara swallowed. "Why are you here?" "Because the tower doesn't just remember who you are. It remembers who you could have been." The mirror rippled, and Elara's reflection changed. Now it showed her in a black cloak holding a lantern made of bone and thread. Her face was emotionless, her eyes were white, glowing. The figure raised its hand. Elara felt her arm move without choosing to. She tried to resist. She couldn't. "What is this place?" she demanded. From behind her, a new voice replied, "It is the fork in your soul." She turned sharply. A second Elara stood there, not from a mirror, but flesh and blood. Same body, same voice, different presence. This Elara wore a crown made of broken clock hands. Her mouth was sewn shut, but she spoke inside her mind. "We are all the selves you abandoned." Dozens of footsteps echoed. From all directions she came. A circle formed around her, 10, 20, 40 versions of Elara, each twisted by choice, by time, by loss. Some were crying, some bleeding. One dragged a rusted blade, one was missing a face, one just stood and stared, eyes empty, mouth trembling, the one who gave up. Elara collapsed to her knees. "Why are you showing me this?" All the voices spoke at once. "Because when you reach the top, it will be one of us who remains. You do not ascend whole. The tower takes a piece of you each time." The mirror directly in front of her shattered. Glass didn't fall, it floated, suspended in place, each shard turning slowly in air, each reflecting a different world. She saw herself drowning in stars, herself crawling through a door made of mirrors, herself laughing with blood on her hands, herself standing at the top of the tower, arms open wide as time collapsed around her. Then all the shards realigned and made a new mirror. This time it didn't reflect her at all. It showed someone else, a man, standing inside the tower's highest room, waiting, watching, smiling. And then he turned, slowly, deliberately, and looked straight at her. The mirror began to tremble. So did the others. All the reflections screamed, but without sound. The floor cracked. A sound like grinding glass inside bone filled the air. "You've seen enough," a voice whispered. "You must choose." The real Elara stood, heart pounding, breath ragged. "Choose what?" A door appeared ahead, round, ancient, glowing red at the edges. "One version of you ascends," the reflection said. "The rest stay here." The crowd of Elara's split selves stepped forward. "Which one are you?" She closed her eyes,
She thought of her mother's handwriting, of the breath behind the attic door, of the fog that remembered, of the man who lost tomorrow, of the clocks, of the eye. And she whispered, "I'm the one who keeps going." She stepped through the red door. The room behind her shattered. Chapter 7. The Librarian Without Eyes. The red door closed behind her like a breath being held, and the world went quiet. Not silent, quiet, like everything around her was watching, but unwilling to speak. Elara found herself in a descending spiral staircase made of black bone. It was neither cold nor warm. The steps glowed faintly with inscriptions, millions of tiny glyphs shifting under her feet like insects made of ink. She had the sense that each step was a year, and she was walking backwards through time. The deeper she went, the heavier her mind felt, not tired, full, images pressed against her skull. A king kneeling before a mirror made of smoke, a child screaming as a clock tower fell into the ocean, a woman holding a lantern at the edge of a collapsing star, herself reading a book that wrote her back. She tried to hold on, tried not to lose herself in the cascade. At the bottom of the stairs, the spiral opened into a chamber that defied physics. She stood at the center of a library with no end. Shelves floated mid-air in concentric rings, spinning slowly, stacked with books bound in everything from silk to skin. Pages whispered as they turned themselves. Lanterns hung in orbit. A giant hourglass turned itself over every 60 seconds. But the sand fell upward, and in the center of the chamber, behind a black marble desk, sat the librarian without eyes. It wasn't human, not anymore. Its body was wrapped in long, pale robes that swam like fabric underwater. Its face was a smooth mask of flesh, no mouth, no eyes, no nose, just the vague outline of what a person might once have been. Yet Elara felt its gaze. She could feel her thoughts slowing down under it, like it was reading her just by existing. "You've come far," the librarian said. Its voice was inside her head, but not like the mirror cells. This voice was older, heavier. It carried weight, like it had been speaking since before humans understood language. Elara nodded, cautiously stepping forward. "What is this place?" "This is the archive of all that was nearly forgotten." Nearly? Nothing is truly forgotten, only misplaced, buried, shelved. The librarian raised one long finger, pointing toward a glowing row of books above. "You are in the section of alternate selves. Every version of every person who ever approached the tower, and every path they did not take." Her name was on the spine, Elara Voss. Subsection, cycle 19,418. She hesitated. "Cycle?" The librarian tilted its head. "You have been here before, thousands of times. You always come, you always climb, you always forget. That is the function of the tower. To make people forget. To preserve what would be destroyed by memory." Elara opened the book. The pages inside were filled with her handwriting, but not the writing she remembered. These were records of experiences she hadn't had, yet recognized. The journal described everything: the fog, the map,
the mirror room, even the man in the cafe. This is my life. One of many, the librarian said. Each ascent leaves behind a shadow. The tower is made of these echoes. Elara turned the page and saw something new, something that hadn't happened yet. A door at the top of the tower, a throne made of black stone, herself sitting on it, alone, watching the spiral from above, becoming part of it. "What is at the top?" she whispered. The librarian went still. Truth. What kind of truth? The kind you can only carry once. Suddenly, the hourglass shattered. Glass shards hovered in place, spinning slowly. The librarian stood. "The final part of your journey begins now. What am I supposed to do? Finish what you always start? Or choose not to? What happens if I don't? Then the next version of you will try, as they always do." Elara's book slammed shut. From behind the librarian, a massive gate opened, an arched door made of book spines and clock gears. Light poured out, silver and burning. The librarian spoke one last time. "There is only one floor left. Above this is the room that watches." As Elara stepped toward the glowing gate, she paused and looked back. "Why me? Why do I keep coming back?" The librarian did not answer with words. Instead, it gently lifted the edge of its mask of flesh, and beneath it was her face. End of Chapter 7. Chapter 8. The Room That Watches. The gate closed behind her with no sound, only pressure. The moment Elara crossed into the next chamber, she felt it, a weight, like invisible hands pressing against her skin. Not hard, just constant. A stillness that vibrated, not in the air, but in her bones. It was as if the tower had turned its full attention to her. And now, for the first time, it blinked. She stood in a narrow hallway made of mirrors and lenses, all aimed inward. They didn't reflect her. They showed her footsteps, her heartbeat, her breath, her memories. As she walked, she watched herself be measured. The hallway grew tighter, the light thinner. Then the floor fell away. She did not fall. She floated, or rather, the tower lifted her. With no mechanism, no platform, just upward motion, like she was being drawn through space by something above understanding. As she rose, she passed chambers of impossible size. A cathedral made of dripping clocks. A ballroom where the dancers were frozen in glass. A courtroom where time itself stood trial. A throne room where the only occupant was a massive, rotting mirror. And then the lift stopped. A door opened. No handle, no frame. Just a veil of black smoke. Elara stepped through. The room that watches was nothing like she expected. It wasn't grand. It wasn't endless. It was small, circular, like a cell. The walls were covered in eyes, not paintings, not carvings. Real, living eyes, pulsing and blinking, set into the stone, each with its own rhythm. They didn't look at her, they looked through her. In the center stood a single chair, and on the far side of the room, a window, the only one in the tower. She stepped toward it slowly. The eyes twitched. Some wept, some smiled, some turned red. One blinked out completely, never to open again. But none moved from their places. The tower was watching, but not interfering. Not yet. Elara stood before the window and looked out. Her breath caught. What she saw was not a view, not a landscape. It was herself, every version, every life she could have lived.
Billions of branching paths, each unfolding like a reel of film, some ending in tragedy, some in peace, some in silence, some never truly ending at all.
She saw herself alone in the cabin, never having opened the map, holding a child in a war-torn city, hiding the tower from them, dying on the staircase, forgotten, ascending further than anyone before her, and becoming the next librarian. The window was not a window, it was a lens into all possible selves. "This is why you return," a voice said. She turned. There was no one there, just the chair, and it was no longer empty. Someone sat in it. Not the librarian, not one of the mirror cells, not even a version of Elara she recognized. It was a shadow in the shape of her future. "You are the memory the tower couldn't erase," the voice whispered. "You've climbed this far before, but you always forget, always turn away, always ask the same question." Elara stepped closer. What question? The shadow leaned forward. She could not see its face. "Do you want to know what's at the top?" She nodded. The shadow stood. It walked toward her, and as it passed, it whispered, "Then look away." Elara turned her eyes from the window, and the moment she did, she saw it, the true top of the tower, not above her, not ahead of her, but within her. The spiral had never been a staircase. It had always been her own memory descending into itself. The tower was a construct of her forgetting, a monument built from every version of her that refused to remember why she started climbing. And now she remembered. There had been a name, a sister, a scream in a locked room, a door that whispered, a price she paid, a truth she buried. It rose now like a tide inside her, crashing through her mind like a bell tolling backward, and when it hit her, all the eyes on the walls snapped shut, the tower went dark, the spiral unraveled, time paused, and for the first time in her life, Elara stood still. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9. The name buried beneath the stone. The tower was silent now. Not still, not waiting, just silent, like a grave no one remembered digging. Elara stood at the center of the dark room, her body still humming from what she'd seen in the watcher's window. Her pulse had slowed, her breath was shallow. She didn't know how long she stood there, seconds or centuries, but finally something broke. Not a sound, not a scream, just a whisper in her blood. Go down. There was no staircase this time, only a crack in the center of the floor, thin, precise, pulsing with a dull white light. Elara dropped to her knees and pressed her hand to it. It opened, not like a trap door, not like stone, but like an eye. It blinked once, then rolled back, revealing a shaft of endless black, lined with walls that weren't walls at all. They were names, etched in every language she didn't know, every script that no living person had spoken in 1,000 years. But one name appeared, again and again. Nora. Elara stepped in. She fell, not fast, not tumbling, just downward, like a memory sinking in water. And as she fell, she remembered. She was 13. The attic door had been locked for weeks. Their parents were gone, off chasing conspiracies, maps, artifacts. They left the girls alone more often now. Elara had nightmares about the door, not the sound of it, not even what was behind it. She dreamed about what was trying to forget her. Nora was older, curious, brave in the way that only doomed people are. One night, she whispered, "I saw the tower." What tower? Elara had asked. The one behind the mirror, the one that remembers. She had smiled like it was beautiful, and the next morning, she was gone. Elara hit the floor of the tower's foundation like a breath hitting cold air. No pain, just landing. The space around her was impossibly vast, a black dome filled with pillars of pale grey stone. Every pillar had a name carved at its base. Some were cracked, some glowing, one was bleeding, and in the very centre stood the nameless pillar, the only one without markings. But Elara knew what it was. She walked toward it, her hands shook. She reached out and touched the stone. It was warm, not like sunlight, but like a heartbeat, and when her fingers met the smooth, blank surface, the tower screamed, not aloud. Inside, all the names around her shivered, glowing with sudden violent heat. The air filled with voices, not hers, not Nora's, not the librarian's, but the voices of the forgotten, all crying one thing: remember her. Elara collapsed, her mind splintered, and she saw it all: Nora opening the mirror door, the spiral wrapping around her as she entered, Elara watching, too afraid to follow, the tower offering her a choice: forget Nora, or follow her into madness. She had chosen to forget, to bury the memory, to let the tower seal it in stone, and for that she had returned again and again and again, trying to undo the silence she had chosen. Elara stood. Blood ran from her ears. She pressed her hand against the nameless pillar one more time and spoke the name, Nora. The stone cracked, light poured out, and the floor beneath her opened once more. This time she did not fall. She walked into it, willingly. As she passed through, she heard the tower whisper, "This is the version of you that remembers. Now ascend." End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10. The Girl Who Never Left. Elara walked through the light, not into it, through it. It clung to her skin like warm water, humming gently. Each step forward peeled away the tower's layers, like walking backward through every lie it had ever told. She felt the stones soften beneath her feet, felt the walls breathe in around her, felt the tower notice. She was no longer just a visitor. She was the first one to climb carrying a remembered name. And that changed everything. There were no stairs, no doors, no time, just up. The world around her reshaped with every breath. One blink, the spiral turned into bone. The next, it became a staircase carved from candlelight. The next, it was a single golden thread, stretched from the foundation of the tower to a room that floated above all creation. And then, she stepped off it. And the top of the tower opened like a blossom. It was a garden, but one that had not been touched in centuries. Vines crawled over rusted machines. Mirrors grew like flowers. Fountains poured sand upward into the sky. And in the centre of it all, seated beneath a dead tree that grew clocks from its branches, was a girl. No older than 15, hair dark, skin pale, eyes wide. She sat in silence, staring into a pool of still black water that didn't reflect the sky. It reflected her dreams. They moved on the surface like whispers. She didn't turn around when Elara approached. She only said, "You took your time." Elara's knees buckled. She fell beside her sister. Nora. The name tasted like a key, and in that moment the tower exhaled, a long, slow breath of stone and memory, relief and grief. Nora smiled faintly. "You remembered me, finally." Elara shook her head. "I didn't, not until now, not until the pillar. I chose to forget." "You had to," Nora said. "The tower demands sacrifice. That was the price." "Why didn't you ever leave?" "Because I'm what the tower is made of." Nora looked into the black water. I am every memory someone else gave away. The air changed. The vines rustled. The millers cracked one by one. The sky above the tower turned violet, then black, then transparent. And Elara saw them, versions of herself, looking in, not from mirrors now, but from realities, timelines where she never climbed, where she never remembered, where she never came back. All of them stared at the garden. None could enter. None could reach Nora, except her. "Can you leave with me?" Elara asked. Nora shook her head. "I'm not whole anymore. I'm made of what you forgot. I only exist because you abandoned me." Elara's voice cracked. "Then what do I do?" Nora finally turned to face her, and in her eyes, Elara saw it. Every life she could have lived, every truth she'd buried, every cost she'd refused to pay. Nora smiled gently. "You climb back down. To what?" "To the world, to memory, to carry me with you." The tower began to break, not collapse, unwind. The stones reversed their shaping. The spiral twisted in on itself. The sky became pages, flipping back to the first sentence. "They won't believe me," Elara whispered. "They never do. Then what's the point?" "Because you will. And that's enough." Nora placed her hand over Elara's chest. "I am not meant to be freed, just remembered." Elara stood. The path down shimmered into view, not of stone, not of steps, just memory, raw, painful, blazing with the weight of truth. She took one last look at her sister. Nora faded into light, and the garden vanished. Elara climbed down the tower, but this time the tower climbed with her. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11. The Tower Beneath Her Skin. Elara woke up on the motel bed. Same ceiling, same hum of the broken fan, same blinking light outside the window, but everything was different. Her boots were still wet. Mud from the marsh had dried into cracks. Her notebook lay on the bedside table, closed, but trembling faintly, as if something inside it hadn't finished writing. The map was gone, but on her wrist, a spiral of black ink had appeared, not a tattoo, but a memory branded into skin. It pulsed with her heartbeat. The tower was gone, but it had not let her go. She staggered to the mirror. Her eyes looked older, not in the way of years, but of knowing, of weight, of having remembered something most people choose not to. She opened the notebook. It was full, every page written, but not by her. I was the girl who forgot. And now I remember. The tower climbs with me. I carry the name. Nora. 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 She turned the page. There was a drawing, a door, a spiral, a face, her own, but with no eyes. Outside, the world hadn't changed. Cars still passed. Clouds still moved. But Elara could see the tower now, even in places it didn't exist. She saw its outline in the skyline, behind buildings, its shadow in her coffee, coiling in the steam, its heartbeat beneath her footsteps, pulsing under the pavement. The tower had left something in her, and taken something too. She sat on the edge of the bed and whispered aloud, "Why me?" No answer, just the wind outside. But then her phone buzzed, a message. No sender, no subject, no timestamp, just one word. Remember. She looked up, and there, across the room, reflected in the motel mirror, was Nora. Not older, not ghostly, just standing there, watching, waiting. Elara turned sharply. No one was there, but in the mirror, Nora smiled. "You brought me back," she said softly. "Now don't forget again." The lights in the motel flickered. Elara closed her eyes, and for just a moment, She heard the tower breathe. End of chapter 11.
Chapter 12.
The spiral never ends. Elara stood at the bus stop. The sky above was overcast, dull. The world had returned to its usual grey rhythms. Cars whining, a dog barking in the distance, the flicker of fluorescent lights in the corner store window. But she saw it now. The spiral. In everything. The way smoke curled from a man's cigarette. The way a child absent-mindedly twirled in place. The way a puddle swirled with oil, forming an eye. The tower had not disappeared. It had replicated itself in the fabric of the world. Through her, in her pocket, the notebook burned faintly against her hip. She hadn't opened it again. She didn't need to. She knew what was inside. Every climb, every memory, every price. And at the center of it all, the name, Nora. Elara looked at the people around her. No one else saw it. The spiral in the dirt, the echo in the wind, the shimmer in glass that almost reflected something else. They didn't see, because they had never climbed, because they had never remembered. The bus arrived. She didn't get on. She turned and walked down the street, notebook in hand, unsure of where she was going. But something in her chest guided her, like a compass made of memory. The spiral tugged softly. The one who dreams of stairs, but never remembers climbing them. She turned.
Elara gripped the notebook. What do I do with this? The shadow stepped closer. Whatever you choose, bury it, burn it, or write the next name. She opened the cover. The last page was blank. A pen rested beside it, waiting. She looked at it for a long time, and then, slowly, deliberately, she began to write. This is the story of the tower that waits at the edge of time. It begins with a girl who forgot and ends with one who remembers. Her name was Nora. My name is Elara, and if you're reading this, then the tower has already found you. Above her, the sky turned the color of old memory, and somewhere behind the clouds, the spiral turned once more.